Once you go and find your board from the clamps, you may notice that the back is usually glued to it. The glue does stick to the white stuff, just not as well. If you can't pry it off with your fingers, and I could probably get it, feel free to take a chisel, just stick it in and pop in a couple different places, and it should come right off. Do me a favor, and while you've got it in your hand, just take a glue scraper and try to take some of that glue off of there, so it stays nice and flat for as long as we can keep it. Now, scrape all the tall glue off of this board. Now, chances are you're not going to get every single bit of it. Just get the worst of it so we can put it through the planer sitting as flat as possible. We take the board straight to the planer, and our next step is to get at least one side flat. We don't need to flatten both sides. There's a lot of reasons for that. I won't get into it. But what you want to do is look at your board, and if you have a side that is more desirable than the other, like there may be a knot or two that you didn't see, but it's only on one side, that's the side you want to get flat. The other side will be up when we're all done, but we need to flatten one side. I'm looking at my board, and I think I like this one better, but for me it doesn't matter. I don't see any knots, so just flatten one board. Now, because we glued it, we usually start at 14/16, but for this pass, I want to start at 15/16 because there's no way that these stayed perfectly flat. One's going to be a little higher than the other because they shift a little bit. So set it to 15/16, run it through, and you're only going to run it through until one side is flat, and sometimes I'll only do a half turn because I want to keep it as thick as I possibly can. All right, so you can hear it's not really even touching, and that's fine. Go ahead and do the turn, and you want to ease down to it. So I did a full turn, and if I do any more, it'll only be a half turn from here. Very good. One pass is all it took for me at 14/16. It's flat on this face. Even if I had just a little bit off of one end, I'd still probably keep it. Trying to keep it thick. Now we're going to go cut the ends off. At the sled, which is right next to the planer, I just need to trim off one end to get it flat. This end should be good. This edge, I should say, is also good. The ends are not, but I only need to flatten one of them, something that I can cut from on the table saw on the next step. So just ease it in there, and I might take off a blade width, and if that doesn't quite do it, do a little bit more. Back here at the table saw, our widths were 1 3/4. We're going to cross cut over and over and over 8 times to get 8 strips that are 1 3/4, and that'll give us our squares. So 1 3/4 right there. And right now, this is going to be crazy important to keep the board as flat as you can, as tight to that fence as possible. If it goes out, bows out at all, and you get a gap, you're going to get a weird cut. And then none of the cuts after that will be straight. So make sure to hold it nice and tight. So my left hand is pushing in, again, never where the blade is, in front. My right hand pushes through until I get my push stick. So 8 cuts, keep it nice and tight. Now I want you to see, as I'm cutting, I'm not pushing really hard on my left hand. It's a steadying hand. If I push really hard on both, it'll pinch the blade in the back and you'll get a bad cut. You'll get an uneven cut. I've pulled out a couple of parts to help us out. First, here is the top. It's exactly how I cut it. To get your chessboard, obviously, just rotate every other one. And I've set them on the exact same whiteboard that we just got done using and scraping. So there is my chessboard. Now, it is critical, more critical than the up and down, keeping it flat, that it stays flat side to side. If you don't, if one of them sticks out a little far on each end, then I have to trim. What that means, what that'll do is that'll make it so some of these squares aren't perfectly square. Now we got to trim no matter what, but we're trying to minimize that to as little as possible. So what we do, these two boards are found in this bucket that's located under the glue table, okay? I also grabbed a couple of these shorter ones. These are just going to come in handy to help hold them up, because putting these on the sides is not easy to do with only two arms. If I had a third arm, because I could hold these two and put a clamp, that would be great, or have a friend help, but something to help hold these on. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. Now, just like we did before, we lift up every one but the front one. And remember, the way that they're laying, my flat side is down on this. I want flat side to flat board. That'll make it as flat as possible as we glue. So we can go through the exact same process that we did before and glue it all up. There, those will help hold it square while we put the other clamps on. So I want to put these in as close as I can now. Very good, and then we will snug this together. And see how flat we can keep these while in the clamps. Okay, and now we can press down, and this actually is pretty good. It's extremely helpful to have that flat face down. Snug, whoop, as I'm tightening, I can see that it's moving a little bit. So snug it up just a little. Yeah, press everything down and work your way back and forth. Little here, a little there. See, that one popped up, so I'm going to loosen and go back. Happens a lot, so take your time. The thicker we can keep this, the flatter we can keep it, the thicker our lid will be overall, which is what we want. All right, once these two clamps are nice and tight, these can come off. They don't do any good anymore. So I can lay these back in the bucket because we won't need them. And then again, put your name on it somewhere and lay it aside to dry. I'd also like to put another clamp on, if I can. There we go. Put a little more pressure down the middle. Good. Let it dry, and once it's done, we'll scrape it and cut it to size.